it would be cool, and first of all, thanks for meeting me here. It would be cool to talk about a little bit about this judge lawsuit because I don't think really anybody knows. I for one, thought it had ended years ago. I thought it was done and gone with.
No, the lawsuit, it was filed, I want to say 2 years ago now. I could check. Um, Actually, let me check just to be sure. So the first lawsuit to be filed, and it didn't get much coverage, was by somebody in Northern California. His Yale, and he filed against Wizards of the Coast. I am going to look this up. His first motion was filed in January 2016. Or, yeah, I think that's his first motion. And this was right after the, what I call the Christmas Massacre.
So
But Paul wasn't involved in the Christmas Massacre at all. And a second lawsuit was filed by a bunch of judges in April. There were four named judges. Adam Shaw, Peter Golightly, Justin Turner, and Josh Stansfield.
was
And
the
that Justin was one of the people from the Christmas Massacre, and Adam Shaw had at one point been a level 4 judge. I think he's currently a level 2, or he might be back to level 3 now, but he had retired from being a level 4 judge. So Paul's lawsuit didn't gain much attention because Paul is a level 2 judge, not that well known on the Pro Tour, mostly a local judge in the Bay Area. And when he filed, Wizards filed a response, which is an actual kind of comedic response that I think anybody who really cares about this situation, first thing you should do is read Wizards' response to Paul Yale's lawsuit. But when Adam Shaw, Justin Turner, Josh Stansfield, and Peter Golightly all got together, the Wizards of the Coast had to respond. And then Wizards got seriously involved. They filed to have the two cases joined together in federal court. And subsequent to that, a bunch more judges joined. The last time I was aware, there was about 200 judges who were named plaintiffs in the two lawsuits. And there's two sets of attorneys, the ones that started with Paul's lawsuit and the ones who were involved in the Adam Shaw lawsuit.
And are these now combined? So this starts in January 2016, and then they get combined, I assume.
Yes,
And
they
now
are.
basically,
As far as I know, they are currently combined in a single federal court in the Bay Area of California.
can you talk a little bit about what you mentioned, the Christmas Massacre, which seemed to be a turning point for some of these legal lawsuits, and maybe some of the reason why 200 plus people joined on afterwards. Can you describe what that was?
Sure. So what happened was right before Christmas, right around Christmas, when Wizards shuts down, Wizards put out this decision that every single certified judge level 2 and up in the Southwest region, including the regional judge coordinator, Justin Turner, was received a temporary suspension from the DCI. And,
do you know the reasoning?
excuse me?
Do you know the reasoning for this?
Yeah, they claimed that these judges were involved in a Facebook group where leaked cards were being shared.
Okay, I remember this. I don't remember any. This is interesting because I remember the Facebook group and the leaks and the bannings, but I actually didn't know that it was related to judges.
Yeah, so about 12 judges received temporary suspensions, and this did not go down well with the judges.
So I'm sorry. So going back to the Christmas Massacre, so a bunch of judges get banned for being a part of this Facebook group, and if I remember right, it was pretty sketch. Like, these leaks existed, but I mean, if somebody shares something in a group you're in, you're not really a willing participant in that, and I feel like Wizards overreacted.
Wizards definitely did overreact. Wizards wanted to make an example of these people. Part of the problem in the judge community, part of what I see as the problem in the judge community, is Wizards wants to say that we as judges are volunteers, and which is completely false because a for-profit corporation cannot have volunteers. When I first got involved in judging, I was under the impression that the DCI was a separate nonprofit organization. And I mean, it's really hard to find out actual facts about way back when, but there is something to the argument that possibly the RPGA and the DCI were at one point separate nonprofit organizations that were run by TSR, which eventually folded into Wizards of the Coast. But so if there were a nonprofit organization like the DCI, where it was, you know, just a group of people devoted to putting on tournaments, not necessarily involved with Wizards of the Coast as a business, but, you know, very much in the Magic community, but a separate organization. The DCI, to some extent, still has the contours of being a separate entity from Wizards of the Coast. And when it's convenient, Wizards of the Coast likes to say, oh, well, the DCI is completely separate from us, and it's you know, they do their own thing and we don't control them at all. And at the same time, they exert more control on judges than you would be able to legally exert on salaried employees. Now, you have to understand there's a very big difference between independent contractor employees, hourly employees, and salaried employees. For a salaried employee, you can start saying, you know what, even in your private time, even, you know, at any time you're off the clock, you're still representing us, that type of thing. And Wizards of the Coast likes to say that about judges. They likes to say, oh, well, you as a judge represent Wizards of the Coast. So if they were paying us a salary, which, you know, They certainly do not. And a salary is much higher than, being, you can't pay a salaried employee less than full-time minimum wage. So they treat us like salaried employees. They, at one time, were making the argument that we're volunteers, which obviously we weren't and couldn't possibly be. And then they started talking about us being independent contractors. And that's somewhat their argument at this point is, yeah, at some times we use judges as independent contractors. Sometimes what they're doing as judges is their own thing that we have nothing to do with, which is a community of people who love magic, and we are not involved at all. And sometimes when we are involved, judges are acting as independent contractors. That's what Wizards wants to say.
So two things. One, I don't know a lot of independent contractors. As someone who runs their own business, I don't work for free. And it also seems absurd to me to refer to people as volunteers when very clearly, from how I understand it, there's always some compensation, right? You do work, you receive compensation. Just because Wizards of the Coast doesn't pay for it or doesn't write you a paycheck, a lot, like for example, at the local game store level, you work an event, you get a box of cards. That's working and getting paid for it, in my opinion.
Right. So, look, there's a lot going on here. A small part of it is there is a group of judges who feel like, oh, we're getting paid under the table, and they feel that it's fine that we're getting paid under the table, and they're like, oh, well, we're skirting the laws, but who cares? And so a lot of us judges were very uncomfortable with that, but anybody who is uncomfortable with that doesn't make it very far in the judge program. When you bring things like that up, like the fact that, when Wizards gives you judge foils and immediately everybody goes and sells them to the vendors at the event in order to pay for their hotel rooms, that's compensation. That's something that needs to be reported to the IRS. And not everybody wants to. And there's a fear among judges, especially judges from outside the United States, who feel like, oh, well, if we formally acknowledge that there's this work relationship, we're going to need visas to come into the United States. And what if we can't get visas? Which I have to say is really, really ridiculous, because Hasbro obviously gets visas for their employees to travel around the world. And that's just something that Hasbro, as a huge organization with thousands of employees, is used to dealing with, right? They're an international, this is a Fortune 500 company.
Well, they were just in Japan. I mean, I saw posts from Wizards employees, like the coverage team, for example, that were in Japan. So, of course, they had to.
No, the coverage team actually is also independent contractors.
Yeah, of course it is, because that's the most convenient thing, right?
Well, okay, so to some extent, look, if what you're, this is where it gets really into going down to the nitty-gritty of the law that a lot of people don't want to deal with. Right? A lot of people don't want to think about the various state laws, the various, international laws. I remember a judge who was working in Paris over a weekend telling me he had to join a union because of the local laws there. So, I mean, a lot of people don't want to get bogged down in doing things 100% legally, which never rubbed me the right way, because as a judge, you know, if you're a player and you're not following the laws of the city you're in, then we can, you know, we do somewhat care as the DCI and care as Wizards. But if Wizards of the Coast isn't following the laws of the city you're in, who's getting who in trouble? And, do judges really care? And a lot of judges don't want to get involved in that. They're like, I care about Magic rules. I care about the tournament. I don't want to become some sort of law enforcement, and especially not against Wizards.
So, yeah, that's and it seems very convoluted, but I think I'm following. So let me bring it back to these judges are banned, and a lawsuit is created. Are the lawsuits looking for the same thing, some sort of formal compensation or addressing? Or are they different lawsuits?
The lawsuits are very similar. Now, before we get to the lawsuits, I just have to add one thing. What happened over the Christmas Massacre was that one particular judge, who was not one of the banned judges, James Bennett, who has since retired, and that's a horrible loss to the judge program, in my opinion. But he, in protest, he shut down the judge program's website until those judges were, he said until the judges were reinstated. They ended up getting, coming to an agreement with him, but in response, he shut down the judge program website, which in turn shut down all the major tournaments going on, including the Star City Games tournaments, including any GPs, including anything, right? Local tournaments. And that's when it became such a huge deal. And Adam Shaw got involved. He got other judges involved, and they ended up filing the lawsuit.
So that's some serious balls.
Oh yeah.
Just shutting down the site.
Oh yeah. James Bennett, honestly, you would have never expected it from him, because he's a very he's the type of person who thinks twice and speaks once. If he's going to say something, if he's going to do something, he's thought about it first. So, not to say that he's shy, he's not, but he's somebody who doesn't get
he's measured,
emotional, right? And lose his grip and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
And yeah, he was both able to do that because he had used his own money to set up the judge website, and he owned that domain, and he was willing to do that because he saw something that was completely unfair.
Do you think most judges sided with him on that?
Most level 1 and level 2 judges, I would say yes. Level 3 judges, I don't know if I can say most. Level 4
Sure.
And level 5 judges, you have to understand that in order to advance as a judge, you have to pass a lot of tests. It is very difficult to go from level 2 to level 3. to go from level 3 to level 4 is incredibly difficult, and going from level 4 to level 5 is a once in a lifetime thing. For a very long amount of time, there were only 3 level 5 judges in the world.
When you say tests, are you talking about specifically like academic tests, or are we talking also like purity tests or like politics and things like that?
All of the above. I would seriously compare becoming a level 3 judge with getting a PhD, because you have to do work and then you go before a panel of judges in which you get tested. There's a written exam. It is it is like getting a PhD.
And I imagine if somebody on this panel of judges didn't like you, it just wasn't going to happen, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the process has changed, but at one time the rule was that you needed 11 levels of judges on your panel. So you would have a level 5 judge and 2 level 3 judges, or a level 5 judge and a level 4 judge and a level 3 judge. It's changed. I guess 2 level 4 judges and 1 level 3 judge was allowed at some time, but you definitely had to have. You would never be able to get up to 11 levels without having at least a level 4 judge or 2 on the panel. And the number of level 4 judges was also circumscribed. And I think the dispute letter, which went out with the Therese Nielsen lands, I think certain other information that had become available to other judges by the time of the Christmas Massacre made it possible for judges to stand up and go, hey, no, we're done with this. You are no longer going to just abuse us like this. And right around that time was when the level 4 and level 5 judges decided en masse to resign.
Let's talk about that. When did that happen? And then I want to get back into then the lawsuit. The second the current ongoing one.
Right. So both lawsuits are both the Yale lawsuit and the Shaw lawsuit are still going on. As far as I'm aware, they're actually still, in the process of. I am not involved in the lawsuit itself. If anybody wants to see the actual court documents, they are available through the court website. You can get a limited number of documents for free, and then you have to pay for them, but they are available. And it is ongoing litigation, which is why a lot of the people who are actually involved, unlike me, can't talk about it. But so when the Christmas Massacre happened, a lot of the judges realized that we had thought, and Wizards gave the impression that if something was wrong, we should bring it up with a level 4 or level 5 judge, and those judges would be able to go ahead and deal with the situation. They would be able to stand up for they were our leaders. And while Wizards gave that impression to level 1 and level 2 judges, it was very clear to level 4 and level 5 judges that was not true at all. And Sean Catanese, who, level 4 judge, he was program coordinator, his blogs are available. He wrote a blog post right after the Christmas Massacre, which I read with my jaw open, because if I were Wizards of the Coast's attorney, frankly, I would be like, you just destroyed our case. I mean, honestly, the content of Sean's blog posts, and I think that has something to do with the fact that he was the judge coordinator in California, where all these legal wranglings have happened. You know, Sean would post these things that would make me go, oh my God, if Wizards lawyers were able to see this before he posted them, they would just freak out, because his admissions, the things that he said regarding the judge program and his understanding of what the judge program was clearly a situation where Wizards of the Coast should have been paying all 5,000 judges a yearly salary, because that is the only way that you can demand what he was demanding, what he thought was okay to demand from judges. The only way you can demand the things that he thought was okay is to pay them a salary.
So the judge coordinator said that.
Well, okay, so you have to understand, Sean was never judge coordinator. He was the judge regional coordinator, which is a judging position. It wasn't a Wizards staff position. When much of this was going on, and then after the level 5 and level 4 judges decided that they no longer thought there should be level 4 and level 5 judges. After that, Wizards started having judge program coordinators, and Sean became one of those, and until recently, I believe he was one of those. I don't believe he is one anymore.
Okay. So, any word on why they resigned?
Yes, because of the Christmas Massacre. That is what I have been told by people I trust, that the judges, the level 4 and level 5 judges, at least a large segment of them, felt that they were in this position where the lower level judges thought they had an ability to stand up for our rights as judges, for fairness, the fair treatment of judges. And since that was not the case, they felt that there should no longer be level 4 and level 5 judges at all.
So did they walk away?
No, I believe the majority of them are still involved in judging. I know a lot of them continued to be judges. It was just they felt uncomfortable from what I've heard. I mean, I wasn't involved.
Sure.
From what I've heard, they felt that they were not comfortable with people, especially level 3, level 2, level 1 judges, feeling that if something were unfair was happening to them, that these level 4 and level 5 judges were in a position of authority to stand up against Hasbro, against Wizards of the Coast.
I get it. So I think they're like, well, we don't want to be in a. I think I understand. I mean, they said we don't want to be in a position where people are coming to us for help because we're powerless anyway.
I think so, yeah. And they came up with different ways of having people do the level 4 and level 5 stuff while not having that level system where you think that this person outranks you, so this person has more authority than you do, and this person has more control than you do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to get on the timeline, so now Christmas Massacre happens. The rest of the L4s, or the majority of them, say, "Screw this. We're gonna stay around, but we're gonna retire as level 3, or we're gonna just move back down voluntarily."
All the level 4 and level 5 judges became level 3.
Okay, and now the lawsuits. So let's look at just the big class action. What are they seeking in this? What do you think the end game is of the lawsuit?
Well, the complaints are available. I know that there is a definite request on the part of judges for an independent nonprofit organization that will be able to have judges go back to being volunteers.
I'm sorry. So do you think that means, when I hear that, I'm just trying to run it back, and you let me know if this makes sense. When I hear that, I hear, like, we're fine with the current situation, but we want to work for a nonprofit, not a for-profit.
I think it's beyond that. Right now, Wizards of the Coast is willing to pay a certain amount, such as paying for judges as independent contractors, which they have started to do, and setting up the independent contractor system in order to retain control over the DCI as they want. So this is worth enough money for Wizards to do, because they want that type of control both over judges and over the system as a whole. Judges, I believe, and there's 200 judges who are named plaintiffs from last count I know of. So it's hard to speak for all of them, but if you read the complaints, what is being asked is, okay, let's have a separate nonprofit organization for judges judging Magic, and this organization is going to have some level of independence where we can affect how judges are treated, and we can affect what the rules are. So I'll give you an example. I think vast majority of judges do not mind being paid in judge foils, and I think the vast majority of judges would prefer if Grand Prix locations were carpeted to getting $10 a day, more or less. Because as a judge, you are walking a lot, and concrete floors hurt, right?
Yeah.
It's not so much that judges are being greedy or they want money. In fact, I think Wizards is willing to pay a lot more money to retain the control over judging, that the independence of a nonprofit would provide.
So when this lawsuit, what is the, I mean, so they're looking for some changes to the way the judge program works, but as somebody who doesn't really understand all this, how this works, I when I hear lawsuit, I think, well, they're suing for money. Is that not what's happening?
Well, they are suing for money. So here, I will, looking at the complaint that was filed on April 2016. So the prayer for relief, this is what the judges asked the court, right? One, that the court determined that this action may be maintained as a class action. Two, that the court declared the defendant's policies and or practices of failing to pay minimum and overtime wage will violate the FLSA, that's the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's the national minimum wage law. That the court declared that the defendant's policies and practices fail to pay minimum wage according to California law. That so we're getting violations of their failure. And then at number 10, they ask an order preliminary and permanently enjoining defendant from engaging in the practices challenged herein. So saying you can't continue to do all the things that you're doing. Number 11 is a mandatory injunction requiring Wizards to incorporate a separate nonprofit recreational gaming entity that could lawfully utilize unpaid volunteers. So that's number 11 of the complaint that they filed with the court. And then number 12, 13, 14, and on are asking for money damages and attorney's fees and costs. And then number 19, such other and further relief that the court may deem just and proper. So this is the actual Shaw complaint that was filed in April 2016. It's a public court document.
So we're talking about a large sum of money here, because it sounds like Wizards would have to bear the cost of starting this nonprofit organization and funding it and doing all these things.
Well, I think the unpaid minimum wage, and here it gets into a question of when exactly judging. So is judging when at an FNM? Is that considered working for Wizards of the Coast? And does Wizards of the Coast owe everyone who acts as the judge? Because every FNM has to have, when you report an FNM, you have to include somebody, certified or not, as a judge for that FNM, right? So, and this is where actually the FNM foils get involved. Because there is a strong argument to say, what a judge does at FNM is they run a tournament for Wizards according to rules set by Wizards that is being advertised on Wizards of the Coast website, because they have that tournament locator, which is used to sell Wizards of the Coast product, because a lot of these FNMs, even if they're not constructed, even if they're not constructed, meaning, sealed product, you're still using, people buy Wizards products in order to play in these tournaments, right? And you have to run it according to the Wizards proprietary software you're using, that you have to be trained how to use, and Wizards of the Coast has to agree that this person can have a judge, can be a judge, because and this is a huge thing. If you can exclude someone from doing something, that is one of the key things that the courts ask about whether or not this is an employee. Whether or not you could tell this person not to do it. Because if you can tell this person to do it, you are what the courts call suffering the person to do this work, right? Then you may be an employer, right? So in order to be a judge, you know, if you're on the DCI banned list, you can't be a judge at FNM. So are these judges at FNM who are distributing prizes that Wizards of the Coast is providing according to rules that Wizards of the Coast sets, that feeds into Wizards of the Coast's Pro Tour? The data from it is integrated into Wizards' website and their data tracking and all that. So, you know, there is a very strong argument, and that's the argument, one of the arguments that are made in these court documents is, hey, Wizards, even we're not just talking about Grand Prix or, you know, these big events. What about the Friday Night Magic? Is that judge an employee of Wizards? And that's something Wizards of the Coast is, I believe, much more afraid of than the other things, because that could be liability. You know, just imagine minimum wage. What, an FNM takes 4 hours? Minimum wage for every single judge who worked at every FNM since this complaint was, well, 4 years before this complaint was filed. That is a lot of money.
Oh yeah, you got to be talking about tens of millions.
You know, it's very hard to say, but part of what is the problem for Wizards is they keep records of all this stuff, right?
Yeah, they're their own worst. Their own worst star witness.
Right. So if the court says to Wizards of the Coast, "Hey, Wizards, why don't you tell us who was the judge for each FNM that you held in California?" I mean, this is California law we're talking about right now, but, you know, could be other law as well. Hey, who was the judge? Well, Wizards has a record of the judge because every FNM has to list a judge. And what time did that FNM begin? Well, Wizards has the exact timestamp of the first round and has the timestamp of the last round. So, you know, it could get pretty bad for Wizards.
So that's why nobody's talking about this, right? I mean, this is potentially disastrous and for the entire game, right? I mean, this is bad.
It's disastrous for the entire game if Wizards of the Coast insists on those judges being employees of Wizards of the Coast. Alternatively, Wizards of the Coast could set up a nonprofit organization, an independent nonprofit, right? And set up as the governing board of that nonprofit, whoever are the leading judges right now, and have a separate organization which runs tournaments. But that separate organization is no longer going to be under the complete control of Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, that's not going to be there to their liking either.
Exactly. So what if the judges, organization suddenly decides that no, we don't think it's fine for people to do a prize split? What's Wizards going to do then?
Right. Yeah, they can't do anything, right? Other than exert influence and make sure they've, have people on the board.
I actually think they're making too much of a big deal out of this. I think that it's not going to be the disaster that some people think to have an independent nonprofit, because let's face it, the independent nonprofit is still going to be very dependent on Wizards.
Of course, it's just like content creators. Like, you're still incentivized to behave, like disproportionately incentivized to behave. And Wizards can make it pretty good for those people that it needs to be good for. Like, they can have a lot of indirect control.
I think that it is a mistake for them to continue to fight this. You know, my hope had always been that they would immediately just go through, or at the very least, after my dispute with Wizards was set aside, for them to start rethinking about the situation. You know, it was at some level, they brought this on themselves. All they needed was not piss off hundreds of judges.
Yeah, certainly this is a rod of their own making in a lot of ways. And they you know, the curious thing is, though, isn't it possible that because this lawsuit is brought, couldn't they both get dinged for back minimum wage and have to set up the nonprofit?
If the lawsuit, okay, so if the lawsuit, if the judge agrees, then yeah, that's exactly what would happen. Is they would have to pay for all this back pay, and they would have to set up a nonprofit. Now, let's take a different point of view from that. Wizards of the Coast has insurance, I am sure, for employment practices liability. And
right, I'm sure. Good point.
They may be thinking, you know, if we lose this, then we put in a claim against our insurance, I guess, maybe. And you have to also think about the fact that if they change their procedures right now, that the lawyers who are suing them are going to argue that this change in their procedure is an admission of guilt.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, boy, I mean, this thing isn't going to go away without some major. It's like, if these guys drop the lawsuit, then I mean, there's 200 people on it. Not all 200 people are going to walk away.
Well, yeah. I mean, the lawsuit is not going to be thrown away. And there are 200 people who are named litigants who are actually involved in the class action suit. Class includes some 5,000 judges, I believe, at least.
Yeah, that's pretty spicy. And I think people can, if they're interested, like, this stuff is all public record. I don't know exactly where the case is, and I would imagine that it's Hasbro's intent to drag this out as long as humanly possible.
Right. And honestly, I mean, what bothers me is not the compensation, and what bothers a lot of the judges is not the compensation, it's the treatment of judges. I have seen judges in tears because of how they have been treated while judging. That's not fair. That's not right. And that's why a lot of us are fighting with Wizards. Is I am perfectly fine with volunteering that time of being a judge, but I'm not going to go clean bathrooms like certain tournament organizers ask judges to do.
Yeah, that seems absurd. Yeah, that seems absurd, right? Yeah, like, what's the saying? Like, there's some saying about, like, you can only use the stick so many times. Sometimes you have to use the carrot or something like that. Like, if you abuse your mule too much, it's going to kick you. Like, eventually, like, it's a willing, loyal thing, and eventually you push it too far. Like, judges, I would think, at least a large chunk of them are like what I would consider the game's most loyal fans.
Oh yeah, I mean, judging is fun. A lot of us enjoy running a tournament happen, and if that judging only involved the judging, and they weren't trying to make us work as Wizards of the Coast employees outside of that, I don't think this would have ever gotten to being a real lawsuit. The reason it became a lawsuit was Wizards of the Coast was demanding that judges, like from the Christmas Massacre, spend their off time, right, running things for the benefit of Wizards. That at that point, once Wizards started treating us worse than is when judges were like, no, you can't treat us worse than employees and still not pay us.
How do you think this ends? How do you think this lawsuit ends if you just had to take a stab in the dark?
My hope is that there is a settlement, and as part of that settlement, Wizards of the Coast agrees to set up a nonprofit organization that will be independent to some degree and will allow judges to go back to being just judges. And, to some extent, Wizards of the Coast is going to have to agree to pay enough compensation so that the court agrees to the class action suit. And unfortunately, I don't think any court is going to accept cards. And while I am certainly in favor of, okay, let Wizards print cards, let Wizards print cards to pay us for the back pay. I don't care. I don't think a court would accept that, even as a even as a settlement. That's the problem.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, lawyers got to get paid too, right?
Oh,
like they want to put a big number
to get paid. My biggest worry is the fact that I think the lawyers on our side, on the judges' side, do not really have any incentive to make this go faster.
Neither side does, right?
They have no.
I wouldn't. Yeah, no incentive. I don't think on Hasbro's side, and no incentive on the complainant side, right? They're both, I mean, Hasbro lawyers are getting paid whether they're sitting there with their feet up on the desk or they're litigating. So they don't, I have on staff lawyers, and any chance I can get them to work, I make them because they bill me the same either way. So interesting. Well, I don't know. I think if I'm understanding everything right, I don't see a scenario where Wizards doesn't have a large cash settlement at the end of this, because the judge is is not going to throw this case out. It's too big, and they're going to get their pound of flesh, and they're not going to let it be cards. I 100% agree with you there. And if I were on the complainant side too, I probably, if they conceded to everything else and then to make it good, they gave us some cards, I agree that I would be okay with it too. But unfortunately, I think the judge is going to be like, Magic cards? No. We need a cash number here.
I wish it hadn't gotten to all of this. I don't think it needed to get into all of this. I think that Wizards has had several opportunities to fix this by settling with people, either individually or a small number of people. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's just how large corporations function. I
Oh,
don't see them doing the right thing without being forced to by the court.
yeah, I think that's a good summation of where I would think too. But I also think that that is how big corporations operate. Like I work with large corporations, Fortune 500, and they don't settle. Like they'll litigate everything. They don't get told what to do as like a general rule because they're so afraid of what precedent that might set. And I get it. And it's interesting to see how this unfolds. And I think for another night, I would like to talk more about. I've started talking about some how press is collusion in the Magic press and how nobody's talking about this. And now that I have a better understanding of just how cataclysmic it might be, it's even more mind-boggling that no one's even asking or talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, when I used to be credentialed press with, I mean, I was a and when I started talking about this stuff, a lot of people made all as if I was making a huge amount of money from, and I never had the audience that you have, not even close. And the audience that I got from talking about this stuff was nowhere the number of people I got from spoiling a single card, right? You spoil a single card, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of people looking at it. You talk about esoteric tournament stuff that the vast majority of Magic players, you have to remember, vast majority of Magic players have never played in a tournament. They're playing at their kitchen table, right? There are people who buy Magic at Target. Right?
Yeah, well, lots of them, right?
Right.
I mean,
so
and that's and that's all they've ever bought. That's the only place they've ever bought it.
And that's all they know about it, right? A lot of them don't realize that there are tournaments. Really funny thing that happened a little while ago was these two brothers got into a fight over a Magic rule, and one of them stabbed the other one with a sword. It made the news. I don't know if you heard it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I got to send you the article. It was hilarious. And as a judge, my first question was, well, cool, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And my second thing was, hey, didn't they know that they can go to, there's a judge chat site. There's all kinds of places that you can get a ruling pretty easily. Judges are 24/7 issuing rulings, and I'm not joking about that. We literally man those things 24/7. So, the problem is that we are so beholden to Wizards of the Coast for everything. And the Guillaume thing, really, I mean, that's something that really needed to be spoken about on the Pro Tour much more than it was, and that was not allowed to be spoken about. And anybody who did speak about the Guillaume thing was ostracized. Anybody who, we depend.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, then.
I will say simply that a very large number of judges felt that Wizards of the Coast, giving people who were involved in the Pro Tour, playing in the Pro Tour, access to cards before other players was unfair. And I think a lot of people who are on the Pro Tour, who are pros, agree that that's unfair. And as judges, a lot of us were like, you know what? We don't want Wizards doing this. And the response, well, That's the first part of it. The second part of it was, in order to enforce their non-disclosure agreement with the Guillaumes, what Wizards did was issue this DCI suspensions of these people, right? So
what is the what? I don't know what that word means. Guillaumes. Is that referring to? What is that referring to?
Oh, you know the two Guillaume, the two pro players who had access to the God book.
Oh, this is the New Phyrexia thing?
It might have been New Phyrexia. I have to look, but there were two. There was one particular pro player who, because he was a blogger, was given access to the God book. You know what the God book is, right?
Yeah.
He was given access to the God book, and he had shared the God book with people in his play group, and someone in that play group had allowed it to go outside the play group, which is how Wizards of the Coast found out what happened. And in response, Wizards of the Coast issued a DCI ban on 4 people, I believe it was. 2 of them were named Guillaume.
Okay.
And so there were... Is it fair for some pro players to have access to the God book before others, especially when you're coming up close to a some sort of sealed tournament, or even constructed tournament?
Yeah, and they have since stopped that, right? That doesn't happen anymore.
I doubt very much they've stopped that. I believe the God book is being shared in ways that pro players... There's a lot of things I have to say, and this is... Stay tuned for next episode. There are a lot of things that happen on the Pro Tour which judges and Wizards know about, that we wish we could either stop or reduce, or some which unfortunately it is not possible to do, and would be scandalous if more people were aware of. And I think the God book, the Guillaume/God book controversy, there was a lot there which needed to be hashed out, not been officially hashed out.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that. And I wanna thank you for your time. And